Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining our AI and automation webinar. My name is Shah and I'm part of the marketing team here at Bespoke. We'll be diving into how the Power Platform can transform your business and your work. But before we do, I just want to give you a brief introduction into what we do and what we're all about here at Bespoke. So our main aim is to make organizations operationally effective through the Power Platform. We've been running for over 10 years now, and we are a Microsoft partner. Dan and Rachel are technical consultants here at Bespoke. We'll be taking you through this live demo. I will now pass it over to Dan.
Lovely, thanks, Shah. Hello everyone, I'm Dan Finan. I'm one of the technical consultants at Bespoke, and what that means is I work very closely with businesses to understand their challenges, their processes, and then help them leverage the Power Platform to make everything a bit slicker. So the purpose of the webinar today, we're going to look at a little bit of automation and AI and how that can improve everything for you guys. So when we say AI and automation, what are we talking about? So in the context of business, so automation is very much leveraged in technology to achieve an outcome, but reducing the input from humans. If it's minimal input or no input at all, the aim is to reduce it. And then obviously we've got AI, very hot topic at the moment, right? Artificial intelligence. It's basically computer systems simulating human intelligence, okay? And we're basically leveraging the two to make business processes a lot slicker. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel to take you through some of those.
Awesome, thank you, Dan. As Shah mentioned, my name is Rachel Bird. I'm also a tech consultant here at Bespoke, working alongside Dan. So when it comes to automation and AI, there's a huge amount of business processes that can really leverage these tools. And so some of the really common use cases and places where we think that professional services should get started include things like documentation. So day to day, we send out and we receive a huge amount of documents, and we all know that if those aren't sort of stored and managed properly, it can become quite hard to find these type of things. So using automation is a really good way to manage processes like that. Things again like training our staff, onboarding new staff. These can be quite painful processes or quite time consuming. So automation is a really good use case to be using when it comes to training. And then the one we're going to look at today, something we all need to do, something we all receive, is invoicing. So we're going to be digging into that today and giving you some live examples of how you can leverage automation and AI when it comes to your invoicing. It's a huge gain to be made when you use automation and AI, specifically when you're doing it within professional services. So there's some really common things we know why we should be doing it. So efficiency and productivity, that's spoken about all the time. But there's actually a huge amount more benefit that can come from these tools. So we think about productivity. If we're freeing up time for sort of more high value activities, we're going to be getting a lot of benefit out of that. Client satisfaction is another really important piece. So if we can deliver what we do faster and with fewer errors, then our client's going to be a lot happier because of it. Some other areas like innovation. So we get more time to focus on creativity and problem solving when we're doing less of the manual, boring stuff that takes up a lot of our day-to-day time. Often we see actually that when you start using automation within your business, staff then become aware of what it can do, and they also come up with their own innovative ideas on how they can actually be leveraging it within their own roles. Profitability, really important. So we're optimizing the resource that we've got and reducing our costs, and then also actually maintaining our competitive edge against our competitors and staying ahead by embracing technology.
Awesome, thanks, Rach. So today, as Rachel said, we're going to look at invoicing as an example, but as you saw there are a ton of processes in a business to explore. But we've looked at this as a use case from our client base, and we see this come up all the time. So what I've got on screen now, I've chunked up a very common use case for invoicing. So 9 times out of 10, a document is going to come inbound to the business. And the attachment, again, 9 times out of 10, is probably going to be a PDF. So if you think about the process that a staff member goes through with just dealing with that invoice, right? So as I said, that will land at an inbox, and someone, maybe multiple people, are responsible for finding that email and actually processing that email, reading it, get the context. It might be that they're grabbing the attachment that then has to be stored somewhere else securely, SharePoint, OneDrive, a third-party system, wherever it needs to go. And then what we see is they will take that invoice and then manually type up the information into a different system. So let's say, for argument's sake, the finance system. Only at that point is the invoice passed on for approval. So you've had all these manual steps before someone actually has to action that invoice. And that's just one invoice. So if you think back to the businesses that, your own business or businesses you're working with, how many invoices are coming through the business each month? And not just invoices, as Rachel said, there are so many different types of documents, compliance, health and safety, onboarding, HR, there's a ton, right? So what we're going to do today, and what Rachel has very cleverly done, is come up with a very slick solution for dealing with this particular process and just cutting out those manual steps. So what I'm going to do is hand back to Rachel to demo that back to you.
Thank you, Dan. Awesome. So we're going to kick off our demonstration here today. So I will just move over and share my screen to Outlook, which is sort of where we're starting from today. So I'm just going to drop an email over to this inbox here, pretending to be a supplier, and send through an invoice. Most of the time how we're receiving invoices is through an inbox. And so that's going to be our starting place for this automation. So we'll just give that a few seconds until we receive that email. So in this case, I've got a folder set up where all the invoices go to. I've set up an Outlook rule, but you may have, a shared mailbox that they go to. And what this automation is going to be doing is going to be sitting there and waiting and listening and waiting till it receives an invoice. And it's got some sort of criteria that it has to go through to know that those documents actually are an invoice. So we'll just give that a second and refresh, and hopefully that email has come in. Not yet, just give it a few seconds. But yeah, as I mentioned, this is our starting place today. There's a lot of different ways that you can actually trigger these workflows. So you may choose to actually drop them into a SharePoint file, and that's where your process starts, or you might be using sort of a different range or a different emailing system. We're using Outlook today. Just give it a few seconds.
With live demo, Rachel.
Yeah. Here we go. We've received
Awesome.
it. So awesome. So as you can see here, we've got an invoice come in. Please process this invoice at your earliest convenience. And as an accounts team, I'm sure that actually the amount of these invoices you're receiving is a lot more than just one dropping into an inbox. You can see here, we've got an invoice for, a range of sort of office equipment. So your computers, monitors, keyboard, mouse, very common orders. We all need it. And this automation is actually going to start processing already. So it doesn't actually need me to do anything to actually kick this off. So it's working in the background. So what I've built here is to actually understand and see that that is working. We've got a queue here that we've built just to give it sort of a visual element, because these workflows, like I mentioned, are happening in the background. So you can see that at 12:14, we've got a process that started for invoice 1748, the one we opened, and it's pending approval. And it's sort of already taken some of that information from the invoice and put it into this queue. So now what I'm going to do is I'll head over to Microsoft Teams, which, one second, sorry, just get my pinboard in the way. Sorry, there we go. And so what this has happened now is that we need to get this invoice approved. And so in this demo, it's coming to me as the invoice approver, but in your organization, there might be actually a few different people that need to approve it. So it could be the head of your finance, it could be a line manager, it could be sort of the head of a particular office or a branch. So this is the type of logic that you can build in. And so this invoice has come through to me to approve, and it's quite tidily summarized everything and put it into a card for me to read within Microsoft Teams. So that's a tool that we use day in, day out. But actually, you might prefer to use Outlook and receive those via an email. And you can really actually shape that however way it's going to work for you, works for your business, or even works for different people in your business. We all have different preferences. So I can jump in here and I can actually have a look at the PDF. So before that was in the inbox, and as the approver, I might not have access to that inbox. But what the automation has done is it's actually taken that invoice and saved it somewhere that the approver can see. So in this case, it's SharePoint for us. So cool, I can have a look here, see the inbox, see the invoice. And then I will just jump back into my workflow and I can choose to approve that. So it gives me a quick answer. Thank you for your response. And if I jump back to my queue here, give it a refresh, you'll see that our invoice has now been approved. If I head back over to the inbox, you can also see that the workflow has then actually picked up that email from my invoices folder and it's moved it into processed invoices. So it's done all that on its own. I haven't had to move anything, and it's just quite a clean way of making me be able to see in a sort of visual way that what's been done and what hasn't. Awesome. So that is as simple as it needs to be, really. So it's taken that invoice, done everything for it, and all they've really had to do, apart from changing tabs, is clicking approve on the invoice and viewing that.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. I've just got on screen here just to kind of complement what Rachel just did there. She's stripped out all those manual steps that we covered. So she said there's no human input at this point until the very end when the invoice is approved. So what's happening? That email's coming in, that inbox, rather than waiting for someone to deal with that email, well, that's just picked up automatically. That's dealt with straight away. And then what Rachel did, she's trained an AI model within the Power Platform on those invoices. So it knows when those invoices come out, it can quite easily extract that information. And then what Rachel's done is manipulated it so that information is put somewhere that she can access it as part of the data entry automation. And then beyond that, she's using a flow that goes straight through to the approver for approval. So all these manual steps that do take time, let's be honest, to get this one invoice approved have all been removed, and Rachel's turned it into what is essentially a one-click solution. So you think that's just one invoice, one process, scale that upwards across lots of different business processes. Think of the amount of time you would save. So it's quite an effective one, and we've actually put this out with a number of our clients, and it's been very well received. So something to explore. So I'm going to hand back to Rachel, who's just going to talk us a little bit more around the platform to give you guys an idea.
Dan. Yeah, so we've been speaking sort of a bit more high level at the moment about automation and AI, but the actual tools that we're leveraging today is a suite of tools called the Microsoft Power Platform. And so today we've used a few of these. We haven't used all, but you can actually start seeing how you can build these tools together to make a pretty comprehensive scenario. So the tools here that we can work with are really designed to sort of level the playing field when it comes to automation and AI. Previously, sort of years ago, if you wanted to actually go and build some custom software or some custom automation, it was a pretty expensive undertaking to do, and also a lot of time taken to actually to build these and get them right. So what the Power Platform's done is come in and it's actually really given like any business, regardless of size, from small to large, some tools to actually get going with automation quickly. So the tools we've looked at today, the key one here is really Power Automate. So Power Automate is the workflow tool that was sitting behind the scenes, waiting for that invoice, taking the information and triggering the next steps in the process flow. The queue you saw me bring up, that was a Canvas app built within Microsoft Power Apps. And then sitting underneath those, we've leveraged AI Builder to actually read those invoices. Every supplier will have a different format of their invoice, so it might be harder to sort of understand perhaps, what's the date, what's the due date, and what's the invoice date, and where those lines sit across lots of different invoices, as they all have sort of different styles and formatting. So AI Builder is a pre-built invoicing model, has a pre-built invoicing model that you can use to actually process those invoices, and it learns how to actually identify all the information within your invoices. We've actually stored the information in a place called Dataverse, so a database system that the Power Platform sits on, but you might choose to store that somewhere else. Perhaps it would be going straight into your invoicing software or your finance software. perhaps you've got a different sort of database system you can use, you can leverage all of those. And then we've used the data connectors. So that's actually our way to plug in these tools into things like Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Outlook in this case. But there's actually a massive range of these tools that you can use that don't actually have to be Microsoft, and connectors available to use those.
Awesome. So what does that mean in terms of numbers? I guess that's, it's the first thing people always want to know, right? Well, Hackett Group and Gartner did a survey of UK businesses, and they actually found that on average, the cost of processing an invoice for a UK business is around £15. And if you screw it up, it's around £50. So if you're saving 60% on that average, then that £15 becomes £6. And you might say, oh, Dan, well, it's £9, right? Who cares? Well, grow that upwards. As I said before, how many documents, different types of documents, are you actually processing on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis? Because if it's a lot, the potential to save is huge. And I think when you start applying this logic across your different business processes, you're going to see the savings just grow and grow and grow. And it's about getting in that mindset of how many manual tasks am I actually performing, and where can I sort of start to apply this automation? Because that £15 that just became £6 actually translates into thousands of pounds of savings monthly if you're doing this a lot of document processing. So it's one to explore for sure. And as we're on the topic of AI, I couldn't not mention Copilot for Microsoft 365. It's very much hot topic with Microsoft at the moment, and why not? It is a great piece of tech. So if you're not super familiar with Copilot for 365, it's basically it's a large language model. So a large language model is it's an AI system that's been trained on a massive data. Okay, and we're talking a lot of data here. And the outcome of that is that that model can then understand and generate text that's human readable. So what Microsoft have done, they've fused that with your data in 365, as well as the productivity suite, your Word, PowerPoint, Excel, that jazz, and it also has web capability. So between the four of those components, they make up Copilot for Microsoft 365. And what you end up with is a really, really good productivity tool. We're using it internally at Bespoke, and it's been a lot of fun, and it is a massive time saver. But the reason I bring this up is that as good as it is, it can actually be better too. So if you look at this chart that I've got on screen at the moment, we've got the large language model, which is the core technology that's driving this, right in the corner, right in the center. Obviously, you've got the 365 apps and the web and your graph data within 365. That is the product. But even better is you get to extend Copilot for 365 through plugins and graph connectors. And basically what that means is you can tap into other data sources, not just your 365 data. And the reason that's so key is because if you do have external systems, you sort of your finance systems, your HR systems, data is, outside the Microsoft ecosystem, it's probably very possible that you can plug into that data and start using it with Copilot. And that's not just taking data to read it, that's performing actions on data too. So just to give you a little flavor, obviously Rachel's worked with invoices in this process demo that we've showed you. So why not, let's use some 365 conversation to ask some questions about that data. So Rach, if it's okay, do you mind just doing a screen share your end, and then
Yeah, absolutely.
we can just ask some questions against Copilot.
Yeah, awesome. So as Dan mentioned, yeah, the ability to chat with your data is actually really quite a cool feature. And so this morning we've been chatting away with our invoicing data and trying to get some more information out of it.
Yeah, so as you can see there on screen, so Rachel's already been chatting. She can ask some report-based information, right? Sort of how many invoices were processed, summarize them for me to get some context around the data. But the great thing about Copilot is that you can actually be a bit more creative with your questions, right? So the invoices here, they were used almost like in a mock-up of kitting out an office scenario, okay? And one of the items I can see on the screens there is a pinball machine. So Rach, if you was to ask Copilot, dare I say, what is the most impractical purchase as part of those invoices, would it know? Well, could it take a guess?
Let's find out. So
this doesn't just have to be reporting data, you know, the sort of things. Oh, what have we got there? There we go. So Copilot has actually, intuitively enough, looked at the data and gone, perhaps the pinball machine wasn't the most practical purchase. So it can evaluate those kind of things. So we're kind of going beyond your typical reporting with that kind of question. So if I was a manager, I think, you know, the first thing I'd want to know is, well, who approved that, right? So Rachel, can you ask it who approved it?
I think I know what the answer is going to be to this one.
Oh, she who built it. There we go. So it's gone and it found that it was Rachel who approved that invoice. Okay. But the good thing to know is, so we're not just working off the invoice data here. So it's also working with your 365 data, as I showed in Microsoft Graph. So the invoice itself that was stored didn't contain Rachel as an approver, but because it was done through Teams and Power Automate, it knows from context that Rachel approved that invoice and was able to marry the two together. So that's the kind of power you can have with Copilot, in the fact that you can merge these different systems, ask the right questions, and actually get tangible results. So it's a pretty cool toy to play with at first, isn't it?
It is. And I think you can imagine, Dan, like we're working from home at the moment, and to be able to ask these questions is almost the type of questions that you would ask, you know, if you're in an office. You know, if you hear someone ordered a pinball machine, it arrives in the office, you know, who ordered that? So now you'd still be doing and having that sort of conversational type piece, but actually with your information, and not just kind of scrolling through perhaps a spreadsheet that lists all the purchases we've made this year.
Exactly. So it's just pushing the boundary of what's possible. So it's one to explore if you haven't already. Cool. Thanks for that, Rach. That's really good. So I suppose one of the questions you're going to want to ask off the back of this is, where'd you get started? Rachel, I'm going to fire at you now.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, there's a huge amount of places you can start, but I think really, if you're wanting to get started on your automation and AI journey, there's a few things to have a think about and a few questions to ask. So you need to sort of have an understanding of the technology you're working with. So you know where is your data stored? What tools is the business interacting with that might be different to, say, the tools that you're using? So the line of business applications, where are we saving our files? Those type of questions. And then there's also, in terms of picking a process, there's some core questions you can ask. So where are the pain points within our business? Like naturally, you sort of tend to know the processes that are slowing you down or are making mistakes. Another good place to look at is the processes that fall over when a particular person or a particular team isn't available or they're on holiday. So often with reporting, actually, we see that there's one or two people that are generating these reports monthly. If they're on holiday, the reporting doesn't get done. So that's another really good place to start. And then you also want to think about, you know, what are you doing on a really repetitive basis day to day? So what are the actions that you're sort of doing day in, day out, or across a team you're having to repeat a huge amount of times? And those are good places to sort of to focus on. And then, of course, if you've got one of those processes in mind, you want to get going, or you even want some advice on the processes that you should start with, do feel free to reach out to us, you know, and we can help you actually explore what that process would look like, what it would look like with automation, what it would look like with AI, or and build you out a bit of a roadmap on where that could take you.
Amazing. Cool. Thanks, Rachel. So Shah, I'm going to hand back to you now, because I've just noticed we're a bit short on time. But if we've got any questions from people, then it's a good time to fire them before we wrap up.
Yep. So I've got a few questions. The first question being, what if it fails?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And of course, with any process, you know, sometimes some things don't go the way we expect. Perhaps an invoice in this scenario didn't get read quite the way we wanted it to. And so what we can do in this automation is actually prepare and build for that kind of scenario. So perhaps in this case, we might have sent an email back saying, hey, this email we didn't process this invoice correctly. It needs to be resubmitted. Or we might even build, you know, within that app that we showed, that queue of all the invoices, you might be able to expand that further. and drop it down so you can actually process it manually. So there's actually a huge range of things you can do, but yeah, it's all about how we handle errors when they come up.
Perfect. Second question that we have is, do we have to use Dataverse?
No, not at all. So Dataverse is a very, very good, capable database technology that Microsoft provide. It's very rich audited, it's fantastic, and I'd always encourage people to use Dataverse. But in the real world, your data is going to be in different locations, right? And it's like I said, there's the capability to tap into these different third-party systems and work with the data where it is. But that's something partners like Bespoke could help people with, to actually understand the architecture of their data and how it would work in the context of AI and automation.
Thanks for that. And then the next question we have is, what other tools can it integrate with?
Yeah, it's a good question. And honestly, it's so many, and the list is growing day by day. So, today we've showed you it using Outlook and Teams and how that all plugs in, which are obviously all Microsoft tools. But the connectors that we talked about earlier, the list is ever growing, and there are a huge amount available. It's actually really worth going and having a look online. But a lot of modern line of business applications, there's connectors available. And then perhaps in the case that one of your tools there isn't a connector available, often you have the ability to create a custom connector and use APIs to sort of integrate with that data, provided this API is available. So the list is endless and ever growing. So it's worth checking out.
Thanks, Rachel. So next one we have is, are we paying already, or do we need extra licensing?
Yes and no, to be blunt. So obviously with your 365 licensing, business premium, those kind of things, they will come with a certain amount of seeded capability. So especially around building your own flows and apps, like Rachel had on the screen. As we get into the more complex builds around automation and venturing out into different third-party systems, there are different licensing requirements, but it's very much on a case-by-case basis. So again, that's the kind of thing we work with clients on, to understand where the data is and how it function and what the cost implications would be for that.
Thanks, Dan. And then the last question we have is, could we use a similar automation for invoicing our clients rather than processing the invoices we receive?
Yeah, absolutely. So every business is unique in its own way, but a lot of the challenges are the same. So even though we've shown an invoice inbound and dealing with that and how it's approved, if there's a process outbound that needs to be adhered to, you apply the same logic, right? You come in and explore, where are the manual steps, who's doing what, how many people are involved, where is the data? We start working and mapping that out, and then we leverage tools like the Power Platform to go and automate that. So yes, very much so. And in fact, that's what I kind of encourage people to do off the back of this call, is to go away, start evaluating the business processes, right? In your own role, in your department's role, in the wider business, and start to spot those manual patterns. Because once you're kind of on the platform doing the automation, it's very easy to expand that outwards and cover a lot more processes. And then obviously the reward, the value becomes a lot greater. So yeah, it's very much encourage people to do that.
Perfect. Thank you. So I just want to say thank you again for joining us, and thanks Dan and Rachel for that demo as well. If you have any further questions, or if you're interested in our services, please don't hesitate to get in contact. But for now, have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you and goodbye.
Cool. Have a good one.
Thank you.